Amy McLaren, welcome to the Yes Effect Show. How are you?
I am so good. It's so good to see you. How are you?
I'm incredible, and I've been anticipating and looking forward to this chat for a very long time. Today, we are going to talk about your book, Passion to Purpose: A Seven-Step Journey to Shed Self-Doubt, Find Inspiration, Change Your Life and the World for the Better. First of all, thank you so much for writing it, because I know as I was leafing through it, it was like, you talk about the Oprah moment and the aha moment, and the big give when she had that on her show when she was talking about how you can make an impact. And as I'm reading through your book, I'm like, yes, 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 yes. So,
Oh,
um, I want to touch on a couple things. So I'm just gonna get started with, you
yeah.
were a teacher who had, seemingly this job that is the golden handcuffs that you had worked and toiled and went to school for, and you did something that most people don't do. Can you talk about that and how that led you to leading a nonprofit and writing this amazing book?
Yeah, for sure. So I am a teacher by trade. So yeah, I went to school, did my master's in teaching, and ended up as a grade one teacher. And I don't get me wrong, I loved teaching. I liked it. I loved organizing the social events for like the staff and the kids, but I never truly loved it. Like I got the job, and I remember my in-laws and like my parents and like everyone, oh, that's amazing, Amy, you've got this job, you're teaching. And I mean, being Canadian, teaching in Canada is very well respected. It's a great profession, like compared, I hear some of the stories of people in the States and teaching, and it breaks my heart because in Canada, like we are very well respected. We're paid very well. We have benefits, pension. Like it's the job, the golden, like is that golden handcuffs. It's your job. You stay in it, you get a good pension. So I had this job, and it's funny. Yeah. I just never loved it. And I taught and taught and taught for a while. And then towards the end of the 10 years, I started to feel really restricted and really kind of in this box that I couldn't get out of. And my husband's an entrepreneur, always has been, and he was getting asked to speak at different events and do like these exciting things. And I was like, oh, I can't go. I'm like, I can't go. Like, it's not at Christmas, it's not at summertime. Like, I can't just get on the plane and like be supportive and see him and help. And I remember just thinking, like, this isn't like, I don't like having that restriction on myself. And so that led to then, talking about it with my husband, like, how are we going to, transition from this? Because obviously, like, we're starting another company, I'm teaching. And at the time, the benefits and the predictable income was helping us at the very beginning. And we kind of talked about it a bit. And the funny thing is, we never in our financial plan even talked about my pension, like when we started planning. And I think we both knew, but didn't know consciously. Like I think in our subconscious, we both knew that I wouldn't stay teaching for, 50, 30, 40. Like we wouldn't do it. So we kind of planned where we wouldn't rely on that and then try to get other financial ways to, supplement those things down the road. But yeah, I just became really frustrated. Then I watched Oprah's Big Give, and it was that Friday night. Stu and I were drinking wine. Well, I was drinking wine. Stu doesn't drink. And we watched the show, and I was just like that's what I want to do. Like, I mean, who doesn't want to be Oprah? But then at the same time, I'm like that connection and that giving back and the bonding with other communities. And I realized, I traveled a ton when I was a kid and in my 20s and like in my early 30s, but I really, really and truly love being in another culture and learning from them and working together with that community and just immersing myself in something completely different. And I realized at that point, like I was really lacking that. I wasn't fulfilling that part of me that really loved to give and loved to learn from other people. And he's like, well, Amy, that's great. You want to fundraise money? Like, when do you want to do it? I'm like, well, Christmas, right? I mean, you're a teacher. I only had the Christmas time off, and it was like 2 weeks. And we did, and we fundraised this money. We fundraised 14,000. We took it to El Salvador. We lived with a community in El Salvador for a couple of weeks, and we helped out there. And that was really the beginning of me going back to what truly lit me up and what truly I was passionate about. And then I just kind of dove into there, and that was really the start of our nonprofit, which today is Village Impact.
Oh my gosh, like so much to unpack. So I share many of your same philosophies, and specifically for women. You know, it may be true for men as well, but I can speak specifically to, like there's grains of sand that we hear, millions of them throughout our lives. You're not big enough, you're not brave enough, you're too much, you're too loud, you're not, you should do this, you should do that, you shouldn't be too much. And all of those grains of sand in and of themselves are inconsequential. Like none of them are going to like break you apart, probably. But what happens when it becomes grain of sand, grain of sand, grain of sand in that nanosecond when your body tells you the truth? In that moment where you're like, yes, all of those grains of sand come flooding down, and then you find yourself on a beach. And without even consciously or realizing it, most people who are not Amy McLaren say, "Oh, I can't do that. That's not possible." And what are the odds that I could do that, or what's the logic that that could happen? And the truth is, those grains of sand aren't even our thoughts. And I'd
Oh,
love,
exactly. Yeah,
right? And
totally.
I find this story of yours so incredibly inspiring because you have this innate ability to tap into your knowing. Glennon Doyle calls it, your knowing, that sort of inner truth, right? And the ability to delineate what is a should that society told me I should, and what is actually true for me. So this book for me is not just about passion and purpose. It's about truth, and it's about bravery, and it's about self-awareness and innovation and synergy. And first of all, everybody needs to read it. But it's also a guidebook to freedom and emancipation from those grains of sand, because what I know to be true is when you can tap into what's actually true for you. And the reason I called this podcast the Yes Effect, because that moment for you when your body tells you the truth, that's what I call the Yes Effect. And what you do with it beyond that dictates what becomes possible for you in your life. Can you talk about that moment? Because I was watching Oprah with you that very same time, not with you, but I had the exact, and for everybody listening, I'm sure thousands of you, same thing. We're watching Oprah and the Big Give. And I said the same thing. Yeah, that's what I want to do, but you did it. And
Mhm.
thousands of us didn't. So my question is, when you had that moment and it seemed like this insurmountable mountain that you were about to climb, you said yes when hundreds of thousands of people said no. What did that feel like, and what do you think was the thing that pushed you just over the edge? Because you had the golden handcuffs, and you had the pension, and you had, the summer off and the 2-week Christmas. What was it for you that tipped the scales in the favor of, I can't not do this?
You know what? I think it was just time. Like I had been in my classroom for a long time, and I felt like it was the same things that kept coming up, right? It was the same things I was missing. It was the same conversations I was having with my husband. It was the same thing I was looking online and looking at all the travel things and volunteer opportunities. And I just got to a point where, you realize that if you don't do anything, nothing's going to change. Like nothing will change unless you take action. And sometimes, I think people get so stuck in like making it complicated, like making it really big, right? And when you look at something like starting a nonprofit when I had no idea, yes, that's really big. But instead, I kind of looked at it as what's the next thing? And it was like, okay, we watched Oprah. The next obvious thing is we've got to raise money. So let's focus on raising money. So it's like that's when we asked 10 of our friend entrepreneurs. So we went into like, who do we know? Like, who could we ask like to help raise money? And that doesn't seem like a big thing, right? It doesn't seem like that hard. So it's like always just focusing on the next step for me enabled me to keep going, because if I had sat there, it wouldn't have happened. But then I also wouldn't have anticipated all the struggles that happened. I mean, when we started our nonprofit, it took me 2 years to get a status, like to get a charitable status. And that was me calling the government every day and writing down who I spoke to, what they said, and how long it would be. And like writing it in a notepad and going back time after time to get the ball rolling. But I think what people need to do is like chunk it down. Like to me at that point, it wasn't about starting a nonprofit and raising all this money and building 15 schools. At that point on the couch, it was about finding some people to help and finding the next thing. So I it's not the big thing, it's the small things that then add up to be that bigger thing. But I think I just think people make it complicated when it doesn't have to be complicated. Like, just chunk it down. Like,
Yeah.
one thing, even, we talked about this before we jumped on, but Stu and I just did a mountain climb where we climbed this mountain 17 times, which is the equivalent to Mount Everest. And it was hard. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But when we were doing that, I did at the beginning think like, holy swear word, like that is really high. And I have to do that 17 times. Like, what did I sign up for? But then what we would do is I'd be like, okay, only 3 times right now, or only this one. Like, when we got the mountain and we're like halfway up, no one ever was walking down the mountain, right? No one ever turned around and said, I'm not going to do it. So it's like doing that one thing and focusing on that one thing and then getting to the next thing. And then they become more manageable. And then you have success and you feel good because you just did something so you can do something again. And then it becomes addictive because you start realizing that all the joy that you had is in there, like, and you haven't been using it, right? You haven't been tapped into it. And then all of a sudden, when you start doing something that you're passionate about or you like, it's like, oh man, like that was really fun. Like that was really exciting. I want to do it again.
I have this saying that says, you can't steer a parked car, and you just basically talked about that. Like, sometimes the best gift that you never saw coming, you couldn't access unless you just started moving and you just did, to your point, like the next right thing. In this book, you talk about a lot of things. You talk about possibility, you talk about community and surrounding yourself with positive people. You talk about tapping into your strengths and making connections, eliminating self-doubt, trusting yourself, and legacy. When you talk about surrounding yourself with positive people, what do you think is the difference for people? So I speak to this as well with respect to it being the tipping point between I believe I can and normalizing and demystifying something, because, as Seth Godin says, people like us do things like this. What difference do you think that makes in terms of moving the needle for people with respect to surrounding yourself by the right people who are going in the direction you're going?
Absolutely. I think it's huge. Like, you really have to be mindful about, you know, sharing your thoughts and your dreams and where you want to go. And because if there's, people that haven't had that experience before, it's like, when someone tells you about real estate and investing in real estate, but they've never invested in real estate in their whole life, and they're telling you what they think that you should do, but they don't own any real estate properties. It's like, why would you listen to that person? Because they've never done it. Like, you want to surround yourself with people that have done things that you excites you or that you could see yourself doing, and learning from them, and just chatting with them and being with them, because it's that possibility mindset, and we don't know what's possible until we surround ourselves with people doing things that you thought weren't possible, right? Like, if I were to surround myself just with say teachers, for example, like, so a lot of my friends still, and maybe your friends in community too, that don't understand what I do, or they don't understand what Stu does, my husband. And if I had stayed, or if we had stayed just in that teaching spot, and not to say that it's like to put it down at all, but then you don't know the possibility of what's out there, right? Like, I write about in the book how before I started teaching, Stu and I lived in Mississippi in the States, and we worked with a mentor, a real estate mentor, and I ended up coordinating events all over the States, got paid really well, and we lived in the States. But it was during that time and working with him that my mind got blown open. I'm like, I don't know about real estate. Like, and now we invest in real estate because I credit him opening me to the opportunity. Like, I didn't know about that stuff. And then we're going to these different seminars, and at these different seminars, we're meeting all these people that are doing things that I'd never even heard of, or that I didn't even think were possible. So I think it's important not only to surround yourself with people doing different things, but it's in what you read and the podcasts that you listen to. Like, there's so many opportunities. I don't even still know what's out there, right? Like, we never know everything, but I think being an online entrepreneur, or being an entrepreneur, is a gift, and it's just so much opportunity, but you have to be open to seeing it, and you have to put yourself around people that are doing it. so you can learn from them.
Absolutely. I think the power of saying yes to the right things
Mm.
partly is predicated by who are your mentors and who is your community.
Yeah.
I'm so, again, I'll say it one more time, that it's so inspired by you tapping into what is true for you. I had the pleasure of meeting the singer Pink, and in my research to meet her, it was a whole story for other time. But I learned a lot of things about her, and one of the things that I heard her say, which reminded me of you, is that she said, "I didn't care if I was going to stand at the end of the Venice Beach Pier forever. I'd still be standing there now until somebody discovered me." And so as I, learned all these things about her, finally did end up meeting her. But the thing that struck me was a couple of her bandmates are now friends of mine. So I was at her show in Toronto, and I had one of those moments that sucked the air out of my lungs. And she reminds me of you in this way. Um, you know the point in the concert where everybody takes their phone and they hold it up?
Yeah, the light and move the light.
Yes, and I've
Yeah.
seen that 1,000 times, but there was something about seeing it that time because I'd heard her story and I'd heard how many lives she's affected, and how many people who, were in depression or considering taking their own lives or whatever, and her music saved them. But when you look at 50,000 people and when you get a visual of what that looks like, and I'm looking around and every single one of those lights is a person who was inspired, who took time out of their day and to come down and watch this show. And my question was, what if she said no?
Yeah, it's powerful, right?
Because it's not just because she's talented. There's somebody working at Walmart right now that is talented also, but she didn't say no, and you didn't say no. And what advice would you give to somebody who's sitting on the precipice of something that for them feels scary or daunting because we've been indoctrinated with this is what we should do and this is what we shouldn't do and this is who we should be? But I feel that calling just like you felt that calling. What advice would you give somebody sitting in that scary position who still feels that glimmer of hope?
Yeah, I would say two things. I'd say first, share it. Share what you're thinking with somebody because when Stu and I started our nonprofit Village Impact, we didn't share about it for a couple of years. Like we kind of kept it on the down low. And like my husband is a well-known entrepreneur in the online space, and we both didn't share about it. And we were in Kenya one day, and we're not one day, Kenya had our projects, right? And David Fry, who sits on our board, kind of said to Stu and I, he's like, are you, do you believe that what we're doing in Kenya has changed your business and changed your lives? And we're like, well, yeah. And he's like, why don't you share about it then? And we're like, well, we felt bad. We felt bad because we felt like we were kind of making people feel like they should donate or be a part of it or jump on board. And we didn't want to put that obligation on anybody. But he's like, well, aren't you proud of it? And we said, well, absolutely. And he's like, well, I think by you not sharing, you're actually robbing somebody of the gift to feel that, of the gift to give and receive. And you're taking away other people's chance to be a part of it. It's like the light, you're taking away these people's chances that want to help and support you. And so we're like, well, I'm like, okay. So we went home from that and we started to share more. And then you know what the amazing thing is, and I'm so proud of with our charity, we've never had any ads or anything like that. Like all of our donations and everything that comes in has all been word of mouth. And it's all been because we started to share our message. It's all been because we started to put word out there or share an image or share what this meant to us or how we incorporate giving back into our business. And the more we shared, the more people came on board. And that's how we built our first school. And you know what? All those people that came to build the first school then came and built the second school, like 100% retention, I guess you're saying, like business, right? And that wouldn't have happened if I didn't share what we were doing. So you do need to share whatever you're thinking and put it out there, because when you put it out there, I really believe that there's people that will come into your life that will open opportunities and doors that wouldn't be possible if they don't know what you're thinking, right? So definitely share it. And then to go back to what I said before, it's like, just take a little bit of action on it. Like we said, it's so simple, right? And a lot of people say it, but nobody does it. But if you take something like I got off the couch and found a place to go volunteer, like you've got to do one little thing. You can't just let it sit there. So share about it with your community or share about it with anybody, but then also take a little bit of further action to add on to that.
Mm, that's so powerful. I love the idea of synergy, and synergy in its truest form is when one thing combines with the second thing, and when they're combined, they don't become a mixture of the two. They become their own compound, and the power that becomes it's like the sum is it's greater than the sum of its parts, or something like that.
Yeah.
But I love that concept because it's so true, and people get to be involved in something that they wouldn't be able to otherwise. I'm hoping we can switch gears here because I would like to talk a little bit more about Village Impact and what it
Yeah.
is that somebody who has the bravery and the audacity to be true to themselves, what that can look like if you play that forward. Because to me, this book is the ultimate ripple effect. The proceeds of this book go to your charity, Village Impact, but it's the ultimate ripple impact because this book, if you follow what's in this book and if you pay close attention to it, this will change your life. And in purchasing this book, you get to change the lives of other people. Can you talk about Village Impact and how that
Yeah.
came to be in the work that you're doing?
Yeah, for sure. So you know what's funny, just about the book quickly. I didn't have a book on my vision board. I was never someone that wanted to write a book, but the book came from our nonprofit and some things like where I would get off stage and people would ask like, "Oh, I want to donate or give to the charity, but I can't. I don't have XYZ." And I'm like, "You don't have to start a charity to have an impact. You can still have an impact today by doing what you love and using that to have more impact." But the charity that I founded, so if you rewind and go back to the Oprah story, that started it off. And at the beginning stages, we were World Teacher Aid. And now I'm like, that felt like a good name at the time. And now I'm like, well, I don't know what I was really thinking, but I started, right? You start somewhere. That was what it was. And now it's Village Impact. So in a nutshell, we build schools in rural areas of Kenya. And what I love about our nonprofit, and which I'm really proud of, is we're community driven. And this was really important to me because if Stu and I ever were to walk away from our nonprofit, I didn't want things to crumble. I didn't want things to be left and be reliant on donors to donate. So we formed partnerships with the Kenyan government where every school that we build, they come in and they give us the land, they support the teachers, they support the principals, and it becomes right. So if we were to walk away, it would still run for years and years and years after we would leave. So we build we've built 15 schools to date. We're building our 15th one now. We have our smallest school has, I think, about 320, and
What?
our biggest has almost 600, I think. So it's over like 5 or 6 thousand, something like that, that goes through our schools. And our recent project, where all the funds are going from the book, is to our first girls' school. And this is a huge project for us. We've built high schools. And when I say build a high school, it's like 9 or 8 classrooms in an admin block. Like it's a big school. It's not just like one class, it's like
Mhm.
a full school. So this girls' school will actually be, I call it a double decker school. Because when I grew up in the UK, you know, the double decker buses.
Yes, of course.
So it's like a double decker school. We've never built one of those. And it'll be home to over 600 girls. And the
Wow.
reason why it's a girls' school is because, you know, during COVID, I mean, life for everybody changed, right? It's forever changed. And there's been a lot of hard times for everybody, but particularly in our communities, a lot of our girls were dropping out of school and you know, having early pregnancies and you know, selling their bodies to make money for their families because they had no money and they have no money. And so we've seen, after tracking the girls, like just this drop off in girls. And so we talked about it with the government and the community, and the government said like let's build a girls' school, just a girls' school, because then it provides a safe place for
Mhm.
them to come. Like you said, creates this power and community and having all those girls together. We plan to work with another organization to run some hygiene and feminine product things in there. Like, you know, it's going to be a total girls' school and provide that kind of safe haven for them to come and talk about, you know, all things female related,
Right.
but then like that empowerment for women to come together. And we hope that that'll help with the pregnancies the community as a whole. So we're super excited. It's not a new endeavor in terms of a school, but it's definitely our biggest school and our first all girls. Our other schools are co-ed, and this will be our first girls one. Yeah.
It's so powerful. I'm definitely going to want to get involved and get on board with this particular endeavor. I just think that, you talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and basically if you're to transcend and to build anything and to have creative space, or to better yourself, or even think about possibility, the first thing you need to have is safety. The
Mm-hmm.
fact that you're creating a place where they can be safe, where they can be heard, where they can get their health looked after, when they get their basic needs looked after, and come and just be accepted, creates the space for them to then, learn and do something with them, with what you're teaching them. Of all of the schools and of all of the incredible things that you have done, what is the best surprise that you didn't see coming from saying yes? If we were to trace the route right back to that moment, you're like, I'm gonna do the first next right thing.
You know what? Well, one thing would be the opportunity to write the book. I'm very grateful for Hay House who printed it, and believing in us and the message. And like that book has come from really the creation of the nonprofit. But for me, it's that, and it's seeing the impact that the schools have had, where it goes beyond the school. Like the schools have become a place of hope where other organizations come to use for meetings. Like the elders meet there, the mamas meet there. At our first school, they actually have it's like a strip mall of like a line of other shops. So like there's a barber shop and a cafe shop, and it's seeing, all from one school, all these other ripple effects that have happened. It's seeing other organizations come in and build different things, or like local organizations helping out. It's the ripple effect of, seeing how entrepreneurs have infused giving back into their business like more. And I love that. Like, Stu and I mean, we know each other well, but we've always been about impact and infusing giving back into everything we do, from our family to our companies. And just seeing people travel like this journey with us of creating this nonprofit, and they're still with us today, and they still like put it into their business today. And I think if we don't get out there and do what brings us joy and what brings us true happiness, we, like you said earlier, it's like we're robbing people of the opportunity to support you and to help you and to make change and to leave the world a better place. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely the ripple effects beyond myself, beyond the community, beyond everything.
You are not just somebody who is creating money to build these schools. Like, you go to Kenya, like you get to interact with the kids that have the blessing of being in your orbit, because sometimes all you need is for somebody to just believe in you. And to be able to go there and see the faces and the impact, like the actual humanity of what you've done. Do you have a story that stands out in terms of one of the students that you've spoken to that you're just like,
Yeah.
for anybody, again, who's sitting on that precipice of maybe making a decision, maybe it's not starting a charity, maybe it's something else, but the impact, if you trace it all the way back to the root, comes to that moment where you're like, I'm just going to do the next right thing. For you, what was one of those stories that were just like, wow, I did that?
Yeah. So you know what, one thing would be for sure. Well, first of all, I love going to the community. Like that's my favorite part, is being with the mamas in the community and learning about them and learning about myself and like working together. I love that. But one thing that really stands out, and we've shared this story before when we've spoken from stage, but it's so powerful because it is just believing in somebody. So Stu and I we went from El Salvador and then we went to Ghana. And when we were in Ghana, we didn't have a really great trip. I felt like I was putting a Band-Aid on things. It didn't feel good. The energy wasn't there. And we just visited a school and we had helped, like we had made a bit of a difference, but it wasn't the kind of it wasn't the kind of difference I wanted to make. Like I wanted to work with people and like work with the community and learn about the community. And I felt like we just went there and did good things. Like it didn't feel sustaining. Anyway, so we were coming back from that trip and we were in Accra in the city, and on the way back, we actually got in this horrific car accident. And I write about this in the book in much more detail, but man, I hope to God, I'm never in a car accident like that again. It was super scary where our truck hit a bicycle driver, or a man on a bike, and he flew over the top of our car, and then a truck hit him. And so we saw all this happen. Like everybody stops, like there's crowds of people shouting, like you can imagine like the busy street, and like it just got crazy. So we got out and got away from all the crowd and got in a taxi. Because at that point there's nothing, like I had a lot of anxiety, and I'm like, I need to get out of here. Like there's nothing we could have done. Like they had medics and things were happening. And I'm like, I just want to go back to the hotel. Like, you know, Stu and I are bawling. And we get back and we're walking these streets now looking for something for dinner. And then we were heading out that night, and we were walking down the street, and this little boy kept coming up to us, selling us things. And you know, when you travel, there's always people selling different trinkets and things that you want to buy. And this one little boy kept coming up to us and was like, I'll give you a good deal. I'll give you a good deal. And Stu's like, well, what's your good deal? Like he's a sucker for like a good deal, right? A bargain. And
that's our boy.
Bargain. Yeah. And this boy says, well, I'll make you 3 bracelets and I'll sell you to them for the price of 2. And so he shows us these bracelets, and you could like personalize them. So at the time we were royalty trade. So we're like, can you put WTA on them? And they're like, oh yeah, no problem. But I'm like, we're leaving. And like, I think we had like 3 hours to get to our flight or something like that. I said, will you have enough time? And he's like, oh yeah, no problem. And I'm like, okay, well, sure. And we went to get something to eat, and he sat outside and he's making these bracelets with his hands, and he's wrapping like the cord all the way around the plastic. He gets out his lighter and he lights like the bottom part so they don't fray, like of the material he was using. And Stu went out to talk to him, and he started chatting, and he said his name was King William, like, and that was his name, or is his name. And then I come out and we start chatting about school. And I asked him if he went to school, and he kind of looked at us, and like he was all happy. And then he just went like completely sad. Like his whole demeanor just kind of dropped. Right. And all of a sudden he's like, oh no, like I don't now, because it's my sister's turn to go to school. Oh. And yeah. And their family couldn't afford for all of them to go to school at the same time. So one sibling would go for a semester pretty much at the time. And so I said, well, how much is it to go to school? Like, what's your fees? And he said it was $100, or it was something very minimal. Right. And we're like, oh, and then all of a sudden he pulls out his report card from his backpack, and he starts showing us his report card, and he just lit up again. And he was so excited about what he did do in school when he was there. And he was showing us that he never missed school. And Stu said to me, because I was teaching at the time, he's like, you know, Amy, is this like report card legit? And I'm like I'm going to know, like, I'm an Ontario Canadian teacher. Like the report cards look a little different, but hey, it looks good. Right. So we look at it and we chat a bit more, and we go back in, and then Stu and I decided at that point to help him. So we go back out and we said, Kingdom, like, here's $100. Don't use it for food. Don't use it for anything but your schooling. And if you continue to get an 80% average and you're at school, like as much as you can, we'll pay every year for your schooling. And he was so happy, right? And he's so excited. And we're like, oh, amazing. And he shows us the bracelets, and we're like, yeah, that's great. And we're like, oh, you know, feel good, and left. And, you know, when you meet those people, you never know. Like I was kind of like, oh, I don't know if we'll hear from him again. Like, you know, and then I went back to school, and I was still teaching, and this will really date me, but at that time I didn't have an iPhone. So Stu could have called me. I didn't even have a phone. He just called the school secretary and left a message to call him at recess. So I call him at recess, and he's like, Amy, like I got a big brown package that just came in the mail. And I was like, well, we'll open it. And he's like, don't you want to wait? And I don't know. I have no patience. Like I have opened Christmas presents on the tree. I know that's really bad, but I have no patience. I'm like, open it. And he opened it. And in this package was a picture of King William with his backpack on. I always get emotional when I tell this. And his report card. And what was amazing was a whole bag of things he had made. So he made a tie that said Mr. Stu. He made me a bag that had our charity logo on it. And then he made more bracelets, and in the bracelets, he had his email and on a little piece of paper. So it was like his business card within there.
It's amazing.
But he sent these back, and we were obviously like, that's amazing, connected with him again, paid for more schooling. And then you fast forward to today, and he's graduated from a business school.
Wow.
He's made over, I think we're at 12,000, something like that, bracelets for our nonprofit. So when we had our in-person events, we would give bracelets made by him to the guests, right? So yeah, he's made over thousands and like 10,000 bracelets for us. Wow. And that all came from believing in someone, right? Like you said, like that all came from us championing him and believing in him and like letting him move, like see what would happen. And I think if we hadn't had believed in him or championed him and like encouraged him, his life might be a bit different. Like, I'm not sure where he would have ended up, but I talk to, he's on my WhatsApp. We communicate every now and again. We get messages, and like, I mean, this was years ago now, but he, that was from one meeting, right? And the importance of just believing in people is so important. Yeah.
So for those people who are listening, you know, the number of kids that you have afforded a great education, it's not just a number. Every single one of those children is a King William, or is a child, or is a human being who is going to go on and do something amazing with their life and have the ability to do so because of you saying yes. And for those people out there, again, who are sitting on the fence and wondering if they can say yes, please pick up this book. All of the proceeds go to Village Impact. And if anybody's looking to donate directly, where is the best place they can find you online to support all of your incredible...
So if you go to Village Impact on Instagram or on there, and then Village Impact Kenya on Facebook. And that's where you can find all the stuff about the nonprofit.
Sounds incredible. Amy, I love you so much, and I appreciate you coming and spending time and sharing your incredible story of possibility and hope, and what happens when you do dig into what's true for you and say yes to the right thing. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. It was awesome to spend time with you.
Thanks so much for hanging out with us today on The Yes Effect Show. If you liked this episode, it'd be amazing if you could rate it, review it, and share it with a friend, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And lastly, if you want a behind-the-scenes look, we're going to continue the conversation in the Facebook group, The Yes Effect Inner Circle. So hop on over there, a place to believe, belong, and become.